Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, how the Olympics explain college admissions from Rick Clark's Georgia Tech blog. This week, instead of a question, we're going to have a mental health audible, where Mark and Lisa are going to discuss teen suicide in light of the recent back-to-back suicide attempts on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill. Our interview is with Michael Fong, the creator of the Student Manager podcast. It's part 2 of 2, where Michael Fong talks about the students he interviews on his podcast. And our college spotlight is Mark and Lisa discussing NC State.
Okay, friends, just one announcement today. Your comments are helping us so much in our listener survey. One listener sent in a response, and we don't know names, so I can't give you attribution here. Otherwise, we would. It's that anonymous survey. It said, I really like Mark's admissions tip. How about having Lisa do a mental health tip? So I talked to Lisa. She said, let's do it. So starting on episode 200 every 5th week, when we do bonus content, Lisa will share a mental health tip that comes from you guys. Just one more way we're implementing your suggestions. So if you haven't completed our survey, go to yourcollegeboundkid.com under the resources tab. You'll see listener survey and make your voice known. All right, friends, an admissions tip. So last week, I teased this out. I said if a school has a 25% acceptance rate, that does not mean you have a 1 in 4 chance. You could have a 90% chance, or you could have a 2% chance. And then I left it hanging as a tease. I said I would do a part 2 on this to explain it a little bit more. So here it goes. Now, I feel a little bit of betrayal to the profession with what I'm going to share. It's sort of like I'm going into how the sausage is made, and there's almost like this subtle, unspoken understanding when you've been in admissions that it's almost like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, Dave. What happens in admissions stays in admissions.
Yes.
But I never signed any contract. I didn't do that. My commitments to you, our listeners. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit and pull the curtain back about how this process actually works. So holistic admissions is social engineering. A college has a vision of what they see as a balanced class. And in order to attain a balanced class, they have to put everybody in a bucket, usually multiple buckets. And it's the only way that you can hit your targets. So my tip is know what buckets you're in and know whether any of the buckets you in are institutional priorities for the colleges you are applying to. Okay, you're like, this is just too arcane. Break it down for me. So I just wrote down 11 common buckets. It's not the only buckets, but 11 common buckets. I'm going to give an example. One is gender. One is the state you're from. One is the major that you are interested in, or the college within the university you're interested in. That would be 12 if we count major and college separate there. One is whether you're a recruited athlete. One is whether you have unique artistic talent and you're being recruited for that. Another is a faculty kid. Another is what high school are you coming from? And is it well-resourced or under-resourced? Another is what is the education level of your parents? Another is whether you're a first-year student or a transfer student. So those are different buckets. First years don't compete with transfers. Transfer don't compete with first years. Another is whether you're a residential student or a commuter. Another is race and ethnicity. Another is whether you're an alumni kid. Another is whether you're applying early decision or regular decision. So, example, let's keep it concrete. You're female. You're from New Jersey. You're interested in biology. You're not a recruited athlete. You're not an artistic recruit like a bassoonist or something that the orchestra needs. You're not a faculty kid. You're coming from a well-resourced high school, and your parents have masters and advanced degrees. You're first year. You're residential. You're white. You're a non-alumni kid, and you're applying regular decision to UPenn from New Jersey. Well, you just put yourself in a completely crazy competitive bucket. You can't look at their 7% acceptance rate and say, I have a 1 in 14 chance. So I'm not trying to be negative, because that bucket, you might have a 1.5% chance, honestly, maybe less. I'm not trying to be negative, but what I am trying to do is to help people manage their expectations and to create balanced lists.
Can I ask one question there?
Sure.
So the next question is, how can you manipulate the buckets, or how can you?
It's a great question.
How can you change your bucket positioning in your favor? So for that student, could she do something with geography, like applying to different areas in the country? Can she do something with majors if she's flexible, like maybe saying, as a female, I have an advantage if I'm in a STEM course? Or can she? So tell people how they may have some power over the bucket list.
No, it's a great question, Dave, and I'm really glad you followed up with that, with the bucket list, right?
Bucket list. Right.
So listen, let's break it down. This is what I said. So you can't change your gender, right? You can't change the state that you're from.
Well, I tend to
that's
disagree.
Actually, yeah, that may not be true. We're living in 2021, right?
Clearly, my unwoke colleague hasn't figured that out. But listeners, I'll explain it to him after the podcast.
Okay, Mr. Woke. All right, that's post podcast.
That's right.
So now the major is really interesting because you need to be authentic to who you are, but sometimes there's room for variation here. So I'm going to come back to major in a second. But you can't change if you're a recruited athlete. If you start early enough and you love a sport, maybe you can position yourself, or maybe you can target a school for which you are a recruited athlete if you want to do that. So there's possibility there. Unique artistic talent, you usually have it or you don't. Faculty kid, you have it or you don't. First year transfer, it is what it is. Residential commuter, it is what it is. Race, it is what it is. Alumni kid, potentially, because you could target schools for which your parents are alums and they look at alumni admissions. ED versus regular, you have some control there. So two of the biggest places you have control, you mentioned. Geography, you can target a unique state for which you're underrepresented. But sometimes that's difficult because certain states, particularly between Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, are highly represented at most highly competitive schools. So that's sometimes easier. It's a lot easier to do if you're from Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, Arkansas, Louisiana, some of the states that are tough, right? Major is a big one. You want to be authentic to who you are, but I'll give you an example, Dave. So I'm working with a student right now, and she's trying to decide between pre-med or whether she's going to go to humanities because she's got really, really, really high level poetry in her background and journalism and just writing. And listen, if she said I want to be a doctor, that's what I know I want to do. That's different. She's not sure. And this is a student who reads like she can compete in any pool as a humanities applicant. I mean, her poetry is amazing. Her writing is amazing. And she has perfect 36 on reading and perfect 36 on English, where her math scores are middling, mid-20s. I'm referring to her ACT scores. And as a pre-med major, they're going to look right at that math score and wonder, whoa, are you going to be able to handle our heavy math science curriculum? But as a humanities major, first of all, it's already an unsubscribed major in a lot of places, and her resume is just as good as I've seen in what I do. So that's a place where the major can make a difference. So major is one possibility for that. Geography is another possibility for that. Alumni is another possibility for that. If you are an athlete, targeting a school for which your talents are good enough that you'll be recruited versus non-recruited. So honestly, Dave, the most important thing to do by far is to have a good cadre of schools on your list that you love, that you'll be very happy to attend, where your academic profile is stronger than the average applicant. Don't fixate on the same schools the herd is chasing. Anyway, I don't want to make a whole podcast on this. This is just admissions tip, but hopefully you get the point. Hopefully that's a little helpful for the people.
So you're not necessarily stuck in the bucket of life. You can have some control.
Yeah, and it's actually an extremely important point. I'm really glad you pressed me on it. All right, so here we go. Admissions vernacular. So the word is packaged, but it's packaged as a verb. You want me to use it in a sentence to give you a hint?
Yeah. So this is for me. It's packaged. Okay.
Yeah, it's admissions vernacular. Get up, Mr. Unwoke.
Right.
Wake up.
Okay.
Now, in fairness, Dave, it's 6 a.m. He went to the Bears game last night because his brother Andrew was in town, who had connections in the corporate box. So he's probably working off 2 hours sleep.
That's right, man. I was hanging out with the big wigs, watching the Bears lose to the Packers. It was a great time, though. All right, package.
Yeah, I told him he needs to have his brother come in from Toronto to have connections in his own city. But anyway,
that's right.
That's how we crack on each other. All right, packaged. Go ahead, one.
Packaged uses a sentence.
All right. So it would be interesting to see how Case Western packages Susan Smith this year.
Oh, how they put her together, how they present her. It's sort of like you have certain traits and certain strengths, and what are you going to emphasize? What are you going to de-emphasize? How are you going to what perspective are you going to put on this particular candidate?
Sorry, my friend. This time I
Oh,
was Santa Claus. I actually wanted you to get it. So
oh,
here's what it packaged refers to what we call preferential packaging. It's your financial package.
oh,
And so a school always has the ability to have a certain combination of grants, loans, and work study. And so when they really, really want a student, they can decide to give you less loans, more grants, throw a merit scholarship at you. That's what it is. The package is the combination of grants, loans, and work study that you get. And schools have some ability and flexibility to give stronger applicants who they want more better packages than ones that they want less. Does that make sense?
oh, I should have gotten that. That makes sense. Okay,
That's okay, my friend. There's always next week.
that's right.
All right. So listen, we have the big number today, which is really sad. And then we're getting every fifth episode, I do Stuck's Rant, Stuck's Rave. And I've been chomping at the bit to do my rant. So I have literally been holding back. You're going to have to hold me back. I'm
Okay.
so pissed off about something. So I'm going to be ranting. All right. The big number is a sad one, and it's 1,100. And that's how many suicides are not attempted, but result in death per year on college campuses. It's the second leading cause of death for college students. And Lisa and I changed our whole plans thanks to one of our fantastic dedicated listeners, Kendra out of Maryland, who wrote in and said, there have been a lot of suicides and suicide attempts in this last week. It's gotten worse in the age of COVID. And we were asked by one of our listeners if we could address it. And so we changed our plans. We thought that was a great idea, but it's a sad big number. So let's get off that topic. All right. Ready for my rant?
Okay, man, rant away.
My rant is GPA, grade point average. You're just like, what's your beef with GPA? Everybody knows what GPA is. Why can't there be one way this thing is calculated? So check this out. You have your cumulative GPA, which looks at all your courses. You have your core GPA, which is just your academic GPA, right? Math, English, science, social science, foreign language. You have weighted and you have unweighted, meaning some schools give bonus points for things like advanced and honors courses. Some don't do that. Some do it for AP and IB only. Some do it for dual enrollment. Some don't do it for dual enrollment. Then there's different types of weighting scales. Is it a half point or is it a full point? Then when it comes to GPA, is it a 4-point GPA, a 5-point GPA, a 6-point GPA, a 7, an 11, a 13, a 100-point scale? There's so many different scales. Then on top of that, some colleges recalculate GPAs. Okay, because there's so many different systems all over the place. Well, you say, well, that makes sense. They're leveling the playing field. But to make it worse, a lot of schools regard how they recalculate as the secret sauce. Not everybody will be transparent if you ask them, how do you recalculate it? Some regard that as a trade secret. So GPA, grades and rigor, which are the two things you have to have in any competitive applicant pool to even get a sniffed at. Okay, complete deal breakers. Nobody knows how it's calculated. That's my beef.
Just have to know every school that they're as applying to them quite much in depth. Is that the way to remedy that, Mark?
Well, you just have to, honestly, you just have to do well. Even if you
Yeah.
don't have to necessarily know what's going on before, and that's if you're applying to competitive schools. I
Yeah.
can't say enough. The average acceptance rate is 67%. Okay. So many schools out there would love to have just a good kid who's a B student. But if you're trying to swim with the sharks in the more competitive pools, just do well. As long as you're doing well, you don't even have to know how it's calculated. What I can tell you is they like you to do better than to do average or to below average. You may never know the secret sauce. That's the only way around it, but it's very frustrating, as you can tell by my beef. Okay, now let's go to some positive news. My rave. I want to shout out Colby College. So Colby College did something on October 14th, 2016 that impacted all of the rest of the colleges, not all, but many, many across the country. So I'm going to actually read, it's a little bit of a press release from their website, but it's well earned and warranted. Colby has taken another step in making college education more accessible by allowing high school students to self-report their standardized test scores. This means that students no longer have to pay to send their official test scores to the college to be considered for admission. Official scores will only be required for students that are enrolling at the institution. Vice President and Dean of Admissions Matthew Proto said, self-reporting builds upon the college's longstanding commitment to reduce barriers in the admission and financial aid process. This is one more way we are working to ensure Colby will be more accessible to all students. So basically what used to happen before is, let's say you have a student that's applying to 12 colleges, then you would have to pay around $14 to have your SATs or ACT scores go to all 14 colleges. It's about $168. Okay. Colby said, wait a minute, why should a student have to do that? It's a lot of money for an under-resourced or a middle-income family. You got to remember, it's that plus the app fee, plus travel, plus some people hire consultants, plus test prep, not to mention all the, deposits you got to put down, plus paying for college. There's a lot of expenses. So what they said was, why can't we just let people self-report their scores on the Common App or whatever app you're using? And then if we accept and enroll them, then and only then will we ask for their official scores. And if they lie to us, then we'll rescind the acceptance. So there's no incentive. There's total accountability. So instead of you paying $168, now you pay $14 just to the one school, the one that you know you're going to. And not the rest, but so many schools across the country said, you know what, Colby, great idea. We're doing it too. And now literally hundreds of schools let you self-report your scores. So end on a positive with a shout out to Colby.
Awesome, Colby.
All right, Dave, we got a lot to talk about today. I'm very excited about this article. Take it away, my friend.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
It is a great article. A lot of this stuff we have covered before, but I like the way it is packaged in reference to the Olympics.
Your quick study.
Absolutely. We're going to package this one.
See if I end up woke by the end of the podcast.
So, Mark, we're going to make this very conversational. I'm going to talk about the 5 points, and then we're going to let you delve into them one by one.
Yeah, and first, you'll explain the whole article, right?
I sure will. Yeah. So Rick basically says, in deference to the recently...
Okay, don't talk about Rick like he's your best man at your wedding. It's Rick Clark, the director of admission at Georgia Tech, just so you know. He's now Rick to Dave.
It is, because we were hanging out at the Bears game, talking about what they need to do to beat the Packers, and we done
a Falcons fan, sorry.
All right, well, Mr. Rick Clark basically describes the Olympics process being very similar to the admissions process. He said there's 2 types of admissions processes: a formulaic admissions, which is like the high jump where there's a discernible bar, and holistic admissions, which is more like gymnastics where you have very nuanced and subjective criteria. And he says that how you approach the admissions process is threefold. You train for the event, not for the result. You respect the competition, and you check your ego at the door and be patient. So, Mark, let's jump right into this conversation. And what does Rick mean when he says there's 2 types of admission processes?
So this is something we covered. We covered it probably 3 years ago. It's what I call admissions by the numbers, which are schools that just literally look at your numbers and crunch numbers to make admissions decisions. One of my students applied to Temple, and bang, she got an answer back immediately. They're crunching numbers, and so it's basically just looking at your GPA and your test scores, or in some cases now just your GPA. And so that's what I call it admissions by the numbers. But I really like what Rick did, because the mind's a picture gallery, not an encyclopedia of facts. And so when you put a visual in there, I think it's easier for people to grasp. Everybody can picture the high jumps. The whole blog is comparing admissions to the Olympics. So, and he wrote it around the time of the Olympics. So it makes sense. So the high jump, you either get over the bar or you don't. It's crystal clear. It's clear cut. That's admissions by the numbers. You have the GPA or you don't. You have normally it's looking at GPA, test scores, and in some cases, the rigor of the courses you take. And some schools have what's called an academic index or a freshman index. A lot of schools publish this right on their website. In the blog, Rick gives several examples like Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa. Most of the public Georgia schools use a freshman index, Georgia Tech not being one of them, and UJ not being one of them, but most of the public schools do in Georgia. And so that's just clear cut. But he says with holistic admissions, where you're looking at things like recommendations and essays and extracurriculars and institutional priorities, and for some, demonstrated interest. It's more like gymnastics, where the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so he's making that difference. And he says you have to understand, if you're applying to a school that uses holistic admissions, the evaluation is inherently going to be subjective. Just like in gymnastics or in diving or something like that, one person can have a different score that they assess compared to another judge. Does that make sense, Dave?
It makes perfect sense.
All right, keep going.
And so he talks about the three approaches to college admissions. And so let's discuss the first one. He says you train for the event, not for the result. What does Mr. Clark mean by that?
So to me, of his 3 points, this was his weakest point, but I think it's still a really good point. Basically, he's giving the advice, and what he's saying is an Olympian is not necessarily so fixated on winning the gold. They're focused on doing the right things day in, day out, every day. Did I get up at 5? Did I eat healthy? Did I train according to my training regimen? Did I lift my weights? They make sure that they go through the process and do everything and kind of know that if they focus on doing the right things, hopefully the results will take care of themselves. And likening it to college admissions, you can think of all the things you had to do, right? There's so many of them. Obviously, did I keep my grades high? Did I write my essays? Did I meet my deadlines? Did I build good relationships with my teachers and ask for the right recommenders? Test scores. I mean, on and on and on and on and on, all the components of the process. Basically, what he's saying is and this is the point where I think is strong, where he's saying, if you just execute your plan, the results will take care of themselves. I agree with that point. The point that I disagree a little bit is, I think it's, a lot of times I talk to admission officers, and you guys will hear this when you hear my MIT interview. It comes out in about 5-6 weeks. And we had a little bit of a disagreement there because at MIT, it was 2 mission officers at MIT, and they basically said, I don't think students need to be focused on getting in. They need to focus on building a good list of schools, and what happens. And I get that, but I also think that's a little bit unrealistic too, because I push back, and I don't want to give away my interview. You won't listen to my interview in 6 weeks. But I basically said, well, guess what? When you go to get a job, don't you dress up and get a haircut? Don't you? You may not want to do a resume, but you put a resume together because you need to get in. I think sometimes it's unrealistic to not expect, if you're trying to apply to a school, you're going to be somewhat conscious of getting in. That's the part that I probably disagree a little bit with. That's just inevitable. Your goal in applying is to get in. So you can't completely divorce the fact that you are trying to get in. But I do appreciate his point, which is put the emphasis on doing the right things, and then the results will take care of themselves. So I say I'd agree 80% on that one. Does that make sense, Dave?
It does. And the way I took his point, it was a focus more on character, not on outcome. And the idea being that if you develop the characteristics of being a good student and a good person, a person that he described that when you leave, you will really be missed. Your outcome in life will be assured. You will be successful. So he says you want to be a good college student, be a good high school student. If you want to say that you have intellectual curiosity, develop true intellectual curiosity. Push yourself to explore different things. Push yourself to develop the characteristics of dedication and perseverance. Push yourself to become truly involved in your community, so that when you apply to college, where you go will be irrelevant, because as Frank Bruni preaches, where you go is not who you are. And in developing the characteristics to get into a great college, you're going to end up being a great person who will do well in life regardless of where you go.
You presented it so well. Now I 90% agree. No, it was a really good point.
Yeah.
I've been making, I almost shouldn't have wasted our time talking about this. I think it's unrealistic to not think the kids think about getting in. The core point was so true. And one of the things he said in there, I can't emphasize enough, one of the things I always have learned in admissions, and I say over and over again, is the student that teachers love to teach, that's the kid that normally is going to do well, because it encapsulates both academic prowess and character. And one of the things he says in here is, you want to know what we want? We want kids that will be desperately missed by their high school. That's kind of another way of saying what I say. That encapsulates both, performance in and out of the classroom. And so focus on that and you'll be good. Let's go to the second point, because this is I love points 2 and 3 a lot. And I really love point 2. So I want to, spend a few minutes on it.
Well, can I give my anecdote on respecting the competition?
Sure.
So, Mark and I, we were athletes in high school. We thought we were good in high school. And of course, I thought that I was a good basketball player and I was a good cross country. And then you go and you try out for the JV team and you literally got stank off the court. And the coach loves your character and tells you, but you know what? You can't play worth you know what? So how would you like to be the ball boy?
All right, Joe, Dave. So you know what? It's confession hour. I have to share my story. So I actually ran track at Michigan State just my freshman year, but I was a triple jumper. Okay, and every Tuesday we had to work out with the sprinters. Well, at the time, Michigan State had the fastest 4x4 relay team in the country. All four of our sprinters were sub 46 seconds. If anybody knows anything about
That's
track,
amazing.
that is humming.
Yeah.
They all were between 45.1 and 45.9. Okay. I could jump high. Like, in 10th grade, I could dunk the ball with two hands. I had hops, but I could not. I wasn't really that fast. And we had to work out with the sprinters. And so it was so embarrassing because they would just fly by me. And I remember one time my ego was so bruised, I faked an injury to go to the trainer because I just couldn't handle the humiliation. So anyway, that's your point.
So the bottom line is you think you're good until you don't know how good you truly are till you get to the track meet and realize how good everybody else is. And in this college admissions process, you just don't see your competition. But the admissions do, and people would be shocked when they realize how competitive many of these college admission applicant pools truly are. So
Yeah, and I don't, I'm not trying to be negative, but we're trying to keep it real here. I think if there's one thing I would like to convey to listeners or that I experience in working with students that I don't think they understand is that when you apply to highly competitive pools, if you could be a fly on the wall and read those files, you would be absolutely blown away by the caliber of the students that are in those pools. It is ridiculous how strong they are. And I try to convey it with numbers, but it doesn't get it. You've heard me say 43,000 high schools. That means 86,000 valedictorians and salutatorians just in this country. And so if 1 in 3 applied to the same school, and what happens is most of those kids tend to cluster around 30 schools, that's almost 30,000 applicants just there. Not to mention international talent is ridiculous. And then these hooks like recruited athlete. And that's what people just don't get. And so this is a quote that I want to read from the article that I think is really good. It says, as a high school student, this is one of the biggest challenges in college admissions experience. Understand the skill, strength, and potential of the other applicants that you never get to see or know. Colleges do a good job, often in a pretentious and boastful fashion, of describing how many applicants they received in the prior year or their overall admit rate. However, since you are not in the room where files are received and reviewed, it is impossible to appreciate the talent of this set of students. If you are applying to a college or university with Olympic level admit rates, no GPA, no test score will convey the depth of that applicant pool. Sure, they'll have their percentage of Eddie the Eagle applicants who are not competitive in the profile, but those are outliers. Talk to most college admissions deans or counselors, and they marvel at the ability of students, hundreds or thousands, who do not end up on the podium. Remember, he's comparing to Olympics. If you choose to apply to schools who are denying more than they admit, and sometimes by a wide margin, there is no guarantee. Yes, you have great grades, test scores, letters of rec, essays, and all the things, but so do the other Olympians. So respect the competition. And this is the point that actually made me select this article. And Sylvia Borgo, the newest member of her team, she recommended this to me. I usually read Rick Clark's blog all the time. If you're not reading it, you should. It's been a recommended resource before, but I'd missed this one. I went back and read it. I was like, oh my goodness, what a great point. Thing is, a lot of times people think I'm a great applicant. I got a 35 on the ACT and I'm like, whatever, I'm ranked 6th in my class, but they don't think, well, so are thousands of other people if you're applying to what I call the 1%ers, these 25 schools, but even the 2%ers, 50 schools in the country. These are, the competition. The best thing to do, honestly, is just to broaden your list. But anyway, let's go to point 3.
Well, check your ego at the door and be patient. He gives the example of Simone Biles, who unfortunately could not complete the Olympics, and 2 of the backup athletes who could have easily gone home in discouragement because they were ready and willing to take her place unexpectedly did well and got Olympic medals. So bottom line is your chance may come, but it may be deferred or delayed, so be patient.
Yeah, and this is a great point as well because there are going to be setbacks. I mean, I'll read a quote here and then I'll share a quick story. So it says, you can expect some ups and downs, possible setbacks in a timeline you will not dictate. You may get deferred, denied, waitlisted. You may be an alternate for a scholarship or just miss being named valedictorian, National Honor Society, top 10%, or some other distinction you've been working for, focused, or achieving. When this happens, and it will happen, remember Jade and Michaela, get up, dust yourself off, keep moving forward. There will always be another opportunity, another open door. This is that grit that we talk about developing that is so important. You know, we've highlighted the book How Children Succeed before that talks about grit. So, you know, what popped into my head was a true story, somebody I'm working with in the Midwest. And check this out, Dave. They were told by their college counselor that they were going to be national merit. Okay. Well, without getting into it too much here, national merit, each state apportions a certain number based on the percentage of students in the state, and they look at scores within the state. And they do that so they don't disadvantage a state that may not have as good a quality of education as somewhere else. So every year, the score that you need changes. You have to wait for those state cutoffs to come out. So when it came out, the student missed it by 1 point. And in certain schools that they were eyeing, it would have meant a full scholarship, and they missed it by 1 point. But fortunately, the student handled it, and the parents handled it extremely well. They're very resilient. But that's an example of the kind of thing that's going to happen. And basically, it's saying that in some ways, it's saying this is a marathon, not a sprint. And in a marathon, you're going to have to persevere through this process. There will be some potholes, and that's why so many schools ask essays that have to do with have you overcome a difficulty, because they want to know that you have that extra gear, because it's inevitable in 4 years of college, you're going to have setbacks as well. You know, maybe it's academic, maybe it's emotional, maybe it's with a roommate, maybe it's your health. You know, there's just, you know, maybe with your parents or your family, it's just on and on and on. You're going to have, you know, maybe you don't get that internship or co-op job. You're going to have some setbacks, and, you know, learning now to persevere through them is extremely important skill set. And that's the norm, not the exception. So don't be surprised when it happens to you, because it will happen to you. Like it happens to athletes who train and train and train and train and train and train. And then they, you know, have an ACL, and then they're out for 9 months.
Right. Or, and fortunately for a lot of these Olympic kids, they get a positive COVID test and they miss the whole Olympics. So that was really sad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, just want to put another plug in again for Rick's blog. We've recommended here on this podcast. We've also recommended his podcast, which is outstanding and often takes articles from his blog. We're going to be coming back to his blog from time to time. I see another really, really, really good article that he's written that you know, we'll get in our conversations here in the next 12 weeks. So check it out.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Lisa, you ready to dive in today?
I sure am.
Well, I know we have a heavy topic at hand, but before we do, we're going to talk a little bit about these endowments. We have moved to the number 29 spot, and we're going to go from 29 to 20 today as we move our way to the one metric of the wealthiest schools in the country. So at number 29, we have the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Number 28, Claremont McKenna College in Claremont, California. Right here in yours truly, Atlanta, Georgia. Number 27, Emory University, also known as Coca-Cola University, thanks to Coke made that. Coke gave them their endowment. It was like crazy money that Coke gave like over 50 years ago that grew to this sick endowment. And, you know, it's funny when I haven't seen it recently, but a couple years ago when I was there, you know how sometimes when it's hot, they give you water?
They gave you Coke.
They weren't giving Coke for a while, but now they do like Coke products. In number 26, we have Berea College in Berea, Kentucky, kind of a mission school. And then at 25, we're now really hitting the top 1% of the richest schools, and we're now over $700,000 per student at $724,267, University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia. In number 24, Wellesley College, Wellesley, Massachusetts. And number 23, Rice University, Houston, Texas. And now we're over 812,000 per student. And number 22, Cooper Union in New York. This is one of these schools that's used their large endowment to for the longest, be free tuition for people. It had some fees more recently, but and Rice significantly discounted its price compared to peers because of its large endowment. And at number 21, Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. So there we go. We've got the next 20 ahead of us. But today we're going to call an audible, as I say. That's a football term. Do you know that term, Lisa?
I've heard it, but I don't really know how it relates to football. I'm assuming someone does something loud, but that's all I know.
That's funny. Good guess, but wrong. So an audible is when the quarterback is supposed to have a normal play. They draw it up in the huddle, and then he goes, to line up, in the line of scrimmage behind the center, and he notices something with the defense, and he changes the play at the last second. So we were supposed to talk about, how sort of I randomly talk to strangers on a campus, but we think there's something that's really, really urgent. We address this week, and we're calling audible. We'll push that to next week. I want to give a huge shout out to Kendra, one of our loyal listeners in Maryland. She was the one who recommended that Lisa and I discuss teenage suicide on an upcoming podcast. Lisa, why don't you address our topic and take it away?
Today, we're going to be discussing the increase in suicide on college campuses in recent times. And this has come to the national awareness this last week because here at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, last weekend, there was one attempted suicide, one suicide where a student threw themselves out of a building. And that would be the third suicide or attempted suicide since I think in 5 weeks at UNC Chapel Hill. And student leaders were very upset. They want the university to respond. And unfortunately, this isn't also just a Chapel Hill problem. Other colleges are having sort of what we call clusters of suicides. One college, for instance, is St. Louis University, had 2 suicides close together in September. And so, the question is, what is behind all of these, increases in suicides and what can we do about them? It's important to note that suicide is the second leading cause of death among college students, and it's been like that for quite some time. Most people who successfully complete suicide are male. I think it's sort of 88% male, 12% female. And, concerningly, most 90% of individuals who commit suicide have been diagnosed with some sort of mental illness, but only 44% of them have gotten any sort of treatment in the past year. So we see, obviously, that there is a way that our mental health treatment system is not meeting needs there. Suicide is obviously very concerning. At UNC, they took Tuesday off for a mental health day. I know that parent communities around Chapel Hill have been going to the college and offering free cookies and hugs. I'm not really sure how that's great with COVID, but, I think that their heart is in the right place. And so, people in the community are trying to respond. But the fact is that this has been a growing problem for a number of years. And I'd like to just kind of address a few reasons why I think it's a problem and, maybe some ideas of what we can do about it. So, as I mentioned, suicide on campuses has been a chronic problem. When I did my honors thesis in college at the University of Chicago, it centered on the school's reaction to a suicide that occurred probably the 5th or 6th week of my freshman year, where one of the students threw himself out the window of the dorm and died right in front of my window. And it was just very distressing for everyone. And the university did not handle it in the most, aware way. For instance, the young man who committed suicide had an identical twin brother. He came to collect his things. None of us knew that he had an identical twin brother, so people thought they were seeing a ghost or were freaking out. They didn't know who or what was going on. Just, kind of stuff if you've maybe thought about it a little bit, you might have just alerted people to that fact, and things like that. So it's a very tragic thing. But I think there are a few things that colleges have done that have made suicide more common than it should be. Number one is The colleges consistently have underfunded their mental health counseling centers. I mean, this has been true as long as I have been aware of mental health counseling centers. So that's probably been, over 30 years that I've been aware of this. And pretty much every mental health counseling center in the United States has what we call a capitated treatment plan. That means you might get 6 or 8 sessions, and then they try to refer you out into the community. The problem is that a lot of students can't see a therapist out in the community. They can't get there. Their insurance doesn't allow them to afford it. And frankly, depending on how things are going in that community, there might not be any openings for them to find a therapist. I see a student at Indiana University. She's a lovely person, but she went to student mental health her freshman year. She'd had a very traumatic childhood. She went in, she wanted to get help. She was happy she could finally get some help being out of that situation. And they told her, "You have too much trauma for us. We can't see you." And they sent her on her way, and it took her a couple years to find me. And, I really didn't have the space to take her, but she just seemed really nice and smart and a little sad, and I'm a softie. So
You really are. Lisa really is a softie. I've seen that working with her. She has the biggest heart. Big Valentine over there.
So I said, sure. And I mean, I love working with her. She's wonderful. I wouldn't have had it happen any other way. But my point is they turned her away. Now her brother's at the same school and they want him to get therapy. And again, it's sort of the same problem. There's huge wait lists. So, I think universities, this has been something they've been doing forever. And that's in spite of the fact that we see that students are having increasing mental health needs as time has gone on. This is even before COVID. Students were reporting, maybe 30% of students were saying they're depressed or anxious. I read alarming statistic that 25% of students had suicidal ideation in the past 6 months. So this is not something that we didn't know about, but yet, these centers are not staffed and they're not funded well. I know someone who is a training director at a liberal arts college. She's a training director of their counseling center, and she makes really pennies for the hour compared to what I do. And I'm not saying I rake in the dough either. I mean, so that's it's really sad, and she asked her boss about it. And he said, well, we don't just want people here who are just here for the money. And she was like, well, yeah, but I still need to live. I need to pay for my kid to go to school. I mean, so, it's an appealing job in one way, but it's not an appealing job in the fact that you can't really make a good living at it. So that is one thing. And
can I interject for 1 second,
yes.
Lisa? So as many of you know, unless you're first time listeners, Lisa lives in Chapel Hill. So all this stuff is rocketing and reverberating right in her backyard. And many of you also know Joy, my daughter, lives a half an hour away at North Carolina State, which we'll be doing a spotlight on. And Lisa's been great to take Joy on as a mentor. But Joy is doing her master's in clinical mental health counseling. And she said a couple of things to me pretty recently that reinforce exactly what you said. One, she's like, I have to go into private practice because I looked up how much they get paid and they get peanuts. So that's one thing, reinforcing what you're saying. That's another aspect of not investing in it, right? It's not just how many spots do you have, but if you're not making it affordable for people to live, then that's a deterrent, obviously. And then the other thing, it sort of reinforces what you said. So part of Joy's clinical mental health counseling program, everybody has to hire their own mental health therapists just so that they can see what it's like to be on the other side. And so we have Cigna insurance. And so it's $50 a session for Joy to go with Cigna. Joy was telling me the other day
there's nobody in Cigna. I don't take Cigna.
well, not that. She was saying that so many people in the program, it's like over 100.
Oh yeah, easy.
For them to, these are college students to get the sessions in. And she said, I thought 50 was high, but Dad, this is a deal. And so that's all, just sort of reinforcing some of your points you're making about some of the problems out there in terms of the lack of counselors. And anyway, go ahead, take it away. I'm listening.
Well, and I just wanted to say, with UNC, they're making a big push to be more aware of mental health, but they just put their counseling center on a wait list because they have staffing problems. So, and that just happened this week after the suicides. So, maybe they had some increased demand, but again, it's a big problem. I know my daughter's college, Elon University, the day after the suicides happened, they contracted with an online telehealth service so the kids can get telehealth mental health counseling, and they can also get seen for like strep throat and pink eye, because no one could get into the student mental health center or the student health center. Everyone was going to the emergency room. It's just been kind of a crazy year in that respect. So there just isn't enough. There's just not enough counselors. There's not enough slots.
Lisa, what's your theory on why 88% of suicides are men? We talked about all the pressure that ladies feel to live up to this image and everything coming at them. What do you think explains the disparity?
Yeah, it's method. Men use guns, men jump out of buildings. Women use pills, women cut, they cut, right? So you can kind of rescue somebody from pills and maybe bleeding. But once the trigger's pulled or the jump happens, it's over.
So attempts, if you're looking at attempts, you wouldn't see that level of disparity.
No, it's success. Well, success in quotes, right? Because yeah. So I think that it's just kind of a distressing thing. And then now you add COVID into this situation, and I'll tell you, Mark, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months into quarantine, I just started feeling very uneasy about what was going to happen to mental health in the United States in the next 2 or 3 years. Because I think we are just starting to see some of the fallout of it now still. There was the acute crisis phase, but now we're going to see the damage that it's done to people's lives. And there isn't enough therapists in the world. And there's certainly not enough therapists in the United States. I cannot tell you how many calls I get a day of people looking for someone. I don't have any more room. I can't see them. And it's so sad. I hate, you know me. I'm just a girl who can't say no, right? But
yeah, but you have to.
You have to, because I have to sleep at some point.
Sure.
And so there is nobody who can see a lot of people. I have clients who need to see a psychiatrist. They're being told they can't get in until March. There's no one to medicate people who are coming on, with a new mental health issue. So it's not just that the colleges don't have space. The mental health system doesn't have space. And I don't know what's going to happen a year out from this, but I don't feel great about it.
I remember Dave and I did it in the news, I don't know, half a year ago. And this is based on a survey of how many college students admit to mental health problems. And it was, I have two numbers in my head, 44% or 58. I think it was 58, but even if it was 44, it's still high. It was one of those two. And so we know that COVID has created all kinds of problems.
Right.
What are the warning signs? I mean, because there's a lot of mental health problems you can have, but you hope it doesn't result in suicide. And normally, if somebody is at that point, there were signs when people looked back, right, that they may have missed.
Right.
So what would be the signs for a parent, for a roommate, a friend, to look for and to indicate that something's just not right here? And the second question is, how would you recommend that the person intervene if they're detecting symptoms?
Well, obviously this can look different from person to person, but I think generally you're going to see someone who's seeming very depressed, very down, very hopeless. They might make little cryptic comments like, after I'm gone, or, things that you kind of just don't notice in the moment. But afterwards, you're like, oh, yes, that might have meant something. They might start to withdraw. And I think a lot of times people start to withdraw from their friends. They start to withdraw from their families. So I would say if you have a depressed friend who stops returning your texts, and you stop by their dorm room and they're not really letting you in, that might be a time to alert. A lot of colleges will have a reporting system that you can go even in online and leave an anonymous wellness check tip, and then somebody from the school will go check on them. And then parents, can do the same thing. If you notice that your child is, starting to make a lot of hopeless comments, they feel stuck, they've stopped talking to you much about it, that's another point that you might want to intervene either with the school. I should say, if you ever are really thinking that someone might possibly be at high risk for either hurting themselves or hurting somebody else, the first thing you should do is call 911, and you should talk to the operator and say, I have this concern, and they'll send, a police officer or social worker out to check on them, and they can take them in and have them evaluated, and they can hold them for up to 23 hours to make sure that they're okay. And they'll release them if they think they're okay. If not, then they will petition to hospitalize that person. But I have to be 100% honest that a lot of times people who have decided that they're going to kill themselves don't let on, and they tell no one. And, I live in fear that one of my clients is going to commit suicide. But I've come to the conclusion that if someone is going to do it, if someone is really going to do it, they're not going to call me first. They're not going to give me the chance to talk them out of it. They're just going to do it. And, that is something that you can't control.
It's funny. Probably because this whole topic's on my mind. I got a text message today from a client that referred another client, somebody who Lisa. I haven't even shared this with you. And obviously I'm being really discreet. And they said, Mark, did you hear what happened to so-and-so? My heart just sank and fell.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. You know what I mean? Because I knew we were talking about this and this is on my mind. And so I followed up, and fortunately, it's not good. And it was mental health related. Like they're pulling out of school to go on a mental health leave. But compared to, that was actually a good thing, right? They're actually seeking help.
Right.
So, but that was at, Lisa and I recording this at 9 p.m. I was at the barber. So that was 1:30.
Yeah.
Have to judge it by the
Bad
barber
news
time.
at the barber.
Bad news at the barber. Bad news at the barber.
Well, and you brought up leave. And that's the other thing that I really wanted to talk about that I think contributes to the amount of suicides that occur on college campuses is because typically in the past, if a student exhibited any mental health problems or, what the school considered serious mental health problems, and they're asked to go on leave. And so there's either you get no support or you're out of here. And so a lot of kids, they're afraid to go on leave, right? They're going to lose their progress. They might get a bad grade. Their parents might be mad at them. If they have an abusive home situation like my client, sending her home would be the last thing you'd want to do. And so schools default into that has kept a lot of people at campus afraid to ask for help, not being able to get help at the student counseling center, maybe not being able to get help in the community. And then you have kind of pressure cooker community. And I think that, from some of the reading that I've done, people with mental health issues are protected under the American Disabilities Act. And so what the schools are supposed to do is provide them with accommodations to allow them to stay in school and get treatment and get help. But that has not historically happened. And there's a lot of stigma about it. And I found a letter to the editor in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that came out September 23rd. This was after the suicide deaths at St. Louis University. And I just want to read this because this epitomizes a lot of people's attitudes towards mental health. And this gentleman says, in my opinion, college students who constantly need repetitive mental health advice or who in extreme cases resort to suicide are not mature enough to be in a higher educational setting. They shouldn't have been admitted or once there should be suspended. I believe this stems from their inability to live alone without their parents or never having been allowed to accept responsibility for their own mistakes. Too many parents coddled their children. Today's parents have not grown up themselves and they expect their kids to never make mistakes. It's the parents who should be answering for these failures. College should tell those who claim mental health concerns that they should withdraw.
Yeah, insensitive is an understatement.
Well, but that's sort of like the stigma that a lot of people are up against. Mental health is volitional. It's a choice. Sure. And you're somehow like a weaker person or a lesser person. This gentleman was talking about how we went to World War II and we didn't, none of us had any mental health issues when we came back, which we all know is absolutely not true. But, that kind of denial. So, I think that's another huge problem with the leave system. Colleges, they just don't want to deal with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's some of it is the liability. Some of it is probably the fear of the liability.
I'm sure.
I think in some cases the legitimate, and I say this having been in a residential community.
No, absolutely.
In some cases you legitimately feel like we may not have the level of professional expertise to handle the depth of the person's problems, but in other cases it's, boy, I don't want something happening on our watch either.
Right. Yeah. So I think they probably are conservative, and since they've underfunded their mental health centers, they probably don't have the expertise to deal with that. But if you're talking about 30 to 50% of your student body is now wanting therapy or admitting to mental health concerns, then that's not going to work. You can't send half the people home.
One thing that we had when I was in boarding school, and I know this is a program that a lot of colleges have as well, it's almost like an anonymous tip line,
Hmm.
and it can be really effective. Like all of the students got training on how to do it, and it because it's pretty hard to confront somebody and you don't know how to confront somebody and you're not sure, like, are they depressed or are they having a bad day? And I think most people probably don't have the skills to know how to handle that well. But some of these organizations that they are professionals and they can take a tip in it, and it's like, I'm really concerned about my friend. And it was this, but it could also have been other things like maybe they think fear drug usage or alcohol abuse. It could go into some of those other areas. But what are your thoughts on programs like that?
Well, I think they're great. And I think most universities have some equivalent of that. It's just, it puts the burden on the fellow student then to identify and report these problems. And it's true that they might have a better vantage point, but, it's also a lot to ask an 18 or 19-year-old person to kind of like compute all this and diagnose their friend and say, I think he might be an alcoholic, or I better get him some help. There's like a lot of steps there.
There is, Lisa, but when I think of all the other alternatives, I don't know of a better option, right? Like you're not going to have like a mental health counselor for every 3 kids on campus. Like that's not in the that's not in the budget. And there's lots of stuff that happens in dorms and peers amongst peers that no adult is even watching or observing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, like I can't when I think of all the things out there, I can't really think of. I mean, there's no one size fits all, right? You need it's a multifaceted approach that has to be taken, right? But I really can't think of anything that I don't know can reach the whole population potentially like that can. And I don't want to make it a panacea because it's not. I can't emphasize enough it's a multifaceted approach that needs more resources and everything. But like you said, there's not enough counselors out there. There's not enough training. There's not enough schools don't have the money in the budget to hire them. And there's just when I look at all of one thing I'm not about is saying, okay, well, there's nothing we can do about it, throw our hands up in the air like, we're screwed. Like that's just not an acceptable option for me. So then I have to think, okay, given the limited resources, what are some of the better things that could be done? And that to me seems like one of the better ones because I know from all, I had to sit in on training on it. Um, it wasn't that hard of a thing to do because you literally got to put somebody's name in anonymously. And then that specialized team would approach the person and say, some of your peers are concerned about you. And so that really took away a lot of the I'm confronting my peer. I don't know. I just think it's one of the decent things out there.
It is decent, but I think that the problem is that number one, we don't fund healthcare in this country, so
Right.
that colleges are even having to have student mental health counselor centers. Number two, we underfund the student mental health counseling center. I read so many vignettes of kids going there and just like my client getting turfed without even being seen by a clinician. Number three, we put a tremendous amount of pressure on kids to get good grades. We emphasize grades are sort of the measure of how well you do in school. And that's sort of supposed to be the key to getting internships and jobs. So we put an inordinate amount of pressure on them. And then these freshmen and sophomore, who I think are the most affected right now because of COVID, they've missed all their developmental milestones. They've lost academic, time, and they maybe, haven't learned some of the skills they need. And then we're just kind of throwing them in there. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that these kinds of things are going to happen, given that it's like a toxic soup that kids live in now.
And I see your point. Like I was trying to find not a silver lining in the cloud, but something rather than just have sort of a fatalistic, well, nothing we can do. We're underfunded, under-resourced. I was looking at it sort of from that standpoint, but you're coming at it from another angle, which is there's some root causes that could be addressed. Like, for example, some of the schools have even gone to, what Brown does, like pass fail for a course like that you're struggling with really late in the semester. You can flip it to pass fail. Some of those kinds of things can really make a difference for mental health.
Right. Well, just think about so the guy who who committed suicide when I was a freshman. He got in a bad grade on an OChem test. You know, and OChem at the University of Chicago is known as a flunk out course. They try to fail the kids.
It still is.
It still is.
So Dave has told me some of Lauren's classmates that were as smart as she was that went to University of Chicago because lab school is a feeder into University of Chicago. A lot of University of Chicago professors' kids are there. She said they're over there getting 43s in that class. Like, this is ridiculous. And she's just so happy. I mean, you know, yeah. So the point is, it was a killer then, and that hasn't changed now.
Right. And that's, you know, University of Chicago. I know you and Dave have been ragging on it lately.
I've been trying to bail him out. Dave's been ragging.
I can't argue with anything Dave said, but you know.
Well, you know what? Dave did his residency there, so
yeah,
he has a little bit.
He's like an edge, yeah.
He's in the club. I guess you can say things about your family that you can't say about non-family.
But you know, they're not the only school that does that. I mean, there are a lot of schools. I think Penn is known to be a school that's incredibly competitive and difficult. You know, there are a lot of schools that have flunk out classes,
especially Wharton.
I question why you have them. You know, it doesn't seem like it's a very great way to get anyone to learn anything. Even if you want them to learn they don't want to be a doctor, it seems like there should be a nicer way to do that. So, I mean, this whole system is just kind of, I think, stacked against kids. And if we don't start at least responding to their distress calls and giving them somewhere therapists to talk to and psychiatrists to medicate them, I think we can only expect this problem to increase.
So let's close with one idea you have for our listeners that's actionable. What would it be?
Well, I think that if your child, is looking at colleges, you should definitely look at the Student Health Center and the Mental Health Counseling Center. And if your child has any mental health needs that you know of, it'd be very important for you to go, around that community, talk to different mental health professionals in the community, who are in private practice or at clinics, find out what's available, find out what the wait list is, and that might be part of your decision-making process. So, if you had the choice of going to college in Manhattan, where you can't throw a rock without hitting a therapist, or apparently, a small town in Indiana, that might be a decision maker for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's close with that. That's great advice. Thanks, Lisa. I really appreciate you doing this last second. And I know it's a morose topic, but we have to talk about the real stuff that our students are grappling with. So thank you again.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, the final part of Michael Fong's interview. Michael tells how a student or parent can search through the episodes in his podcast so they can identify specific episodes about specific colleges that they're interested in. He also talks about over 100 campuses that he's visited and his experiences on those campuses. And of course, I put him on the hot seat, and he is very entertaining. Listen and enjoy.
So question for you, if one of our listeners wants to sort of find out your catalog and they want to kind of see if you have interviewed any students on schools that maybe they want to know more about, because most of our listeners are parents. And then we have a lot of college counselors that listen as well. Either one of them might be really intrigued. Oh, Creighton, that's interesting. That's a school on my list. I don't know that much about it. I'd like to hear what students say about Creighton or what an athlete at Creighton says about Creighton. How do they search to find out what colleges you interviewed somebody from?
So my platform, Podbean hosts all my podcasts.
Okay.
And you can go on Podbean, you can go on Spotify, you can go on Apple, you can subscribe to those 3 platforms, and you can see each episode. It'll say episode, whatever number it is, and very specific, right? It'll say download and listen to episode number from this class of 20 student at the University of. That's one way to find out, who's been on my podcast. My Instagram is the student manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I post every episode. They always drop on Fridays. Friday at 9 o'clock, between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. So I'll plug it through Instagram, and then LinkedIn. LinkedIn, always on my LinkedIn under Michael Fong, it always will show the drop of the link, and I get a lot of responses from there. And I also have people reaching out through me on either Twitter or Instagram. It's the student manager where they're saying, hey, can you tell me more? And I'm very, like yourself, if someone reached out to me, I will treat it like they're my client and just very personal and say, hey, I can get you in touch with that student. There's a lot of things I want to grow the student manager to. If it wasn't COVID, I want to do a little bit more forums and monitor conferences where I can bring in some of my former guests, right? College students, parents, because I've had parents on my podcast too that have had 2 or 3 kids already go through the process, because parents out there need to listen to what it's like as a parent as well as a student listening to a student. So there's a lot of opportunities on how to find my episodes, my guests, but when in doubt, just reach out. Reach out to me. I will get you connected to either that student or that episode number. And again, it's the student manager that could be found on Podbean, Spotify, Apple, as well as Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. Great. Well, as we wind down, Michael, we have a tradition. We never let any first-time guests get away without putting them on the hot seat.
All right, I'm ready.
You're ready. You're ready. You're ready. All right, here we go. So, your favorite type of food?
Sushi.
Oh, he's ready for that. And California's got some great sushi, by the way.
Oh, love it. Oh, wait. Before you ask question number 2, it's funny how you do a hot fire. I think your audience and followers will love at the end of my podcast. I do rapid fire, and I ask students real quick, similar questions. I'll say, hey, if Mr. and Mrs. Fong are in town, where are they taking you to dinner, right? They always want to, because college students can't afford it. I'll say, like, what's the best hangover place for breakfast? What's the best late night munchies food? Similar to what you're putting me on the hot seat, but I love it because parents and students are like, I need to try that place. I got to go to that place.
So I'm going to follow up with you specifically on that. Name a couple college towns where if you're going to this college, you wanna go out to dinner with the family here.
All right. So these are ones that I've gone to. If your kid is University of Washington, okay, I'm going to break it down even more specific. If the parents are in town, parents, you got to take your kids to Gaucho. It's a nice steakhouse. All the students love saying, oh, Mom, Dad, take me to Gaucho. It's in Bellevue. It's like 20 minutes across the bridge away from the campus. All right. So that's a great place. I always tell students or parents where to go. I've had a lot of my friends hit me up. Now, if you're visiting Madtown, Madison and University of Wisconsin, where do you want to go? I'm going to give you a sleeper. There's a new place, and Nathan's the owner. It's called State 107, and it's like Italian, kind of like a loungy place, not just your typical college town restaurant. It's a little bit more on the higher end side. You feel like you're in New York, but that's kind of new. And I'm going in there in a couple of weeks, and I already made reservations for 14 people.
Well, guess what? Nathan needs to cover your bill because you just gave him publicity.
I did.
To tens of thousands of people. Just send him a little link, say this, and say, keep this in mind when I come in with my 14 people.
Corporate sponsor, Nathan, State 107.
There you go. All right, talk to me, and I'll let you pick a couple because I hate this. I mean, this is an incredibly hard question when I get it. Talk to me about 1 or 2. I'll let you even go to 3 of the most beautiful campuses you've ever visited.
How did I know you were going to ask that question?
You're ready for me.
Yeah, right. So, and I'm not being biased at all. This is everywhere that I visited starting probably the last 4 years where I'm really more discreet on what college campuses I like. The ones that stick out in my mind, not in any particular order, Penn State, okay, Alton State College, University of Georgia, Athens, great college town. And I'm going to still stick with University of Wisconsin in Madison, University of Washington, Seattle. You can't ask for a better campus when you look at Mount Rainier on a clear sunny day. You see the lake, walking at the Red Square. Those are my top 4 favorite campuses. But I'm going to throw in an honorable mention because a lot of people will say, where is that? Tulane University. Mm-hmm. And that's great for parents. It's in New Orleans. You want food. You want a good city. It's academically, you need to be like 33, 34. It's so pretty out there. Tulane University.
Yeah, the campus is gorgeous too. Really,
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for really good architecture, and they've got great architecture. Talk to me about a couple underrated college towns, in your opinion. You've mentioned some of the great ones, right? That you've already thrown out there, like Athens and Madison. Those are great college towns. Throw a couple other college towns that either you visited when you were the student manager, or maybe you've just visited even in your travels that you think, boy, that's a underrated college town.
All right. Here are some cool places that you need to go check out. All right. So first, Belmont University in Nashville.
That's a good one. That's under the radar too.
I'm telling you, and it's an artsy school. I just told my friend about that school. I said, again, you're in Nashville. For a parent, you're going to love it, but it's a great fill. And it's a small campus right off there. University of Texas, Austin is when you're talking about 6th Street or Delaney Street and you're in the state capital. I don't know why our state capitals seem to be like great college towns, but Texas, that's a phenomenal university. Some little smaller ones that I liked, Lawrence, University of Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go to one that you went. I'm not saying this because I'm on your podcast, but I took my kids to Ann Arbor and we went to East Lansing. Those were some fun little towns.
Those are great college towns.
Those are great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of went kind of mid, college towns, small to the south a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't regard Nashville as a college town, but it's still that campus is was worth mentioning.
Yeah,
which is fantastic.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, in light of the special topic Lisa and I addressed, we wanted to give a recommended resource related to suicide prevention. Lisa, take it away.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about a great organization, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And this organization has been around for a long time, and they've done a great job educating society about what mental illness really is and that it is an illness, not a volitional choice. And they offer a lot of educational information on their website, which is NAMI.org. And they also have 2 resources that you can use. They have a NAMI helpline that's open Monday through Friday, 10 to 10 Eastern Time. And that can help you find a therapist or better understand your loved one's condition, and that number is 800-950-6264. And they also offer 24/7 confidential free crisis counseling, and you can just text the letters NAMI to 741-741, and someone will text you back and contact you and help you with some crisis counseling.
Yeah, and I would say everybody should have that number somewhere, in their phone, because it's really easy to think that this is someone else's problem, and it's not. It can never happen to me. So thank you for sharing that, Lisa. That's our recommended resource for episode 195. Talk to me about the most interesting student you've ever interviewed and what made them stand out.
Oh my gosh. Josh Cheadle. All right. So I think his parents, if I'm not mistaken, this guy was like 34, unweighted, 4.0, 4.1. He applied to Harvard. He applied to Penn, Columbia, Yale. And if I'm not mistaken, I think his parents all went to Harvard. Okay. And they wanted him to go to Harvard. He had all the credentials, went to a prestigious private school out here, Sage High School out here in Orange County. And Josh, he just got it. He was involved in so many, they always say in college, get involved. So he wasn't like the big partier or whatever, but he got involved in a lot of clubs for his business, for his future, right? And I'm talking, this is after he got accepted. He had all these credentials. But the reason why his story stuck out is after he visited, he could have gone anywhere. He went to University of Penn. and he checked out that campus, and he just told his mom and dad, he goes, you know what? I'm going to go to Penn. And his parents were like, I think he said his parents were just like shocked that he didn't want to go to Harvard and follow in the footsteps. But his reasoning was he wanted to create his own path. He wanted to do something different. And I think one of his stories on the podcast, he talks about he bought his parents like UPenn stuff, and they're just like, why did you have Clemson? Like, why don't you have Harvard? But he stood out. And some of my Notre Dame, I had a Notre Dame guest on, amazing student. She kind of stood out too. I mean, that's the rare. They just stand
But that's
out.
good. Those are a couple of colleges that a lot of our listeners have interest in.
Yeah,
So I think you'll probably notice some uploads on those episodes, which is great. Interesting. I had somebody last year turn down Harvard and Yale for Penn as well that I worked with. And,
Wow.
I always respect people that think through the process and don't just do it robotically and really ascertain what's going to be right for them. And so.
And I like that because, you know what, I always will tell a student, and I said, you're going to school for you, right? 4 years, make a difference, have an impact. You're not going to school. Your parents aren't going to school. I don't care what your parents say. Like, I'll ask tough questions. And I don't know if some of your followers or listeners, I have people that have transferred. That's a whole different topic and conversation because the college they went to was not the right fit. And for whatever reason why they went there. And then I get them on after and talk about if you had to do it all over again, like, would you have gone to that school? Like, didn't you know when you stepped foot on that campus? And it's that gut. So I have people that have transferred too that will talk about that experience and help not only a student or parent listening, maybe what not to do.
No, fantastic. Love it. All right. I can't resist this question.
Okay.
What are the universities that stand out as, boy, the parties are wild or live there based on student feedback you've gotten from your interviews? Like, it's an active party scene at this place. Who comes to mind?
Which ones is not?
It's more of the opposite, right? Which one? It's more of the opposite, right? That's probably the easier question.
I'm going to answer it this way because everyone that goes to a campus, they're going to get involved. They're going to have fun. They're going to find their people, right? They're going to find their people.
Right.
I can go from, I'll start on the West Coast. And I have some couples that have come on. I think I've had 3 or 4 couples from different schools and different Greek systems, like a fraternity and sorority. Now they're dating. They'll come on a podcast. Those are great listens. And the reason why I say that is because Washington, and I'm not being biased because I know a lot of people there, but that is a fun party school. Now, if you want college town, I'm going to go back again. Athens is a great one. TCU. Okay, TCU is a great one.
Which is Texas Christian University, for those who don't know. But that name, I struggle when I'm working with students at places like Texas Christian or Southern Methodist or Holy Cross. Immediately, people are like, no, I'm not that religious, and they tune it out. And I've actually had conversations with their admission officers. It's a big hurdle for them. That's why you'll see them branded TCU and SMU, which I would do if I was them as well.
I'm telling you, okay, I have a guest coming on from SMU, and she's in a sorority. She is having the time of her life at SMU. She's a Theta. She's a sophomore, and I keep in touch with her, and we're just trying to find a good date. But SMU, you trust me, you're having fun. TCU, you're having fun. The guest I have on from Colorado, Arizona, they're having a lot of fun, Mark. And then Georgia, where your daughter goes, I can tell you she's having a lot of fun. Like, if you go off of Broad Street, right underneath the arches, that is a college town. I just
like the restaurant scene in Athens. It's like, and she's literally finished up now. So she's on to North Carolina State for grad school. So she's graduated. She's doing the master's, but I personally love the restaurants, and she loved the restaurants, and and she bought a big giant picture of Georgia that she has on her wall, and she says, "This is a place where got my love of learning, and so I want to celebrate it." But yeah, it's an absolute great college town. I said to her recently, "Well, do you see yourself going back there?" She said, "Absolutely. When I'm not in North Carolina, I'm going to be back up there in Athens.
Go watch a football game. That's probably I'll tell you, my favorite place to go watch a football game, Baton Rouge, LSU. To this day, the best tailgate. It was the best tailgate. An SEC tailgate is phenomenal.
No, but LSU, they take their football is at it's at Alabama levels. As far as how serious they are about their football there.
A Saturday night in Death Valley, under the lights. I mean, you've been drinking all day. Just when we went there, I told people, "Hey, I'm from California. Can I try some of this Cajun food, Cajun shrimp?" They are out there starting Thursday, no joke, in their RVs, setting up, cooking, tailgate, and it's a show.
Now, I will tell you, I've had some students I've worked with that have transferred from LSU to Georgia because it was too party and not enough academics. I have worked with multiple people, so you got to find that right balance for everybody. They have some strong programs. I'm not trying to say they don't, but it's definitely not the academic institution that a Georgia is, or a North Carolina or Virginia or Florida.
You mentioned some phenomenal colleges that I've had. Virginia, that's right. A student, I'm trying to find the right date when she comes back home. She'll be on my podcast. But you talk about schools where you're like, "Hey, Michael, tell me like the best." I don't know if I should be saying this, but I've been in fraternity houses in Madtown, Wisconsin, right? It's no joke. There's a reason why University of Wisconsin's rated like the #1 party school. They work hard. They play hard academically. They are studying and they are working hard, but they know how to party. I think is it just because they're Midwest, right? And now it's a big school. The last year, I'm going to say class of 21, and then a lot of juniors. My daughter, she hosted 5 straight weekends, people from the local area, and showed her around Madison. That's how, first of all, it's hard to get into California schools, being here in Southern California. So that's a work hard, play hard institution.
Michael, this has been absolutely fantastic. I know our listeners appreciate your style, and I'm encouraging them to check out your podcast as a resource, ancillary resource to support what we're doing here and learn the student side, get the student experience. One more time, mention the name and mention the ways people can find it.
The Student Manager. That's the podcast. Can be found on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you download. Just The Student Manager. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And you can always email me if you want to know about any specific college at thestudentmanager@gmail.com. And this has been a blast, Mark. It's been fun.
Well, thank you.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
All right, friends, something a little bit more upbeat. So Lisa and I had a fantastic time on September 14th on the campus of North Carolina State. You heard the Meredith College Spotlight that we did maybe a month or so ago. That was our morning, and our afternoon was at North Carolina State University, where our regular listeners know my daughter's involved. My daughter attends as a master's student, clinical mental health counseling. So I want to say that North Carolina State was an enigma to me before we visited. And I'd been on the campus multiple times before, but this is what I didn't get until this visit, when Lisa and I toured the campus, talked to about 12 to 15 students randomly that the admission office didn't assign to us. I always knew there are these 3 major R1 universities in the research triangle. And R1 is Carnegie classification for the highest level of research colleges in the country. There are actually 131 of these R1 institutions. And so I've always known you had these 3 R1 institutions all within 30 miles of each other: Duke, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and NC State. But of the 3, Duke and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill are the 2 most prestigious of the 3. UNC is the flagship and largely regarded as one of the in the conversation for the very top public school in the nation, and Duke is regarded as one of the absolute very top private schools in the nation. And then even athletically, all three are in the ACC, Atlantic Coast Conference, but Duke and Carolina have this very sort of unique rivalry, and North Carolina State claims Chapel Hill as its rival. And so I kind of always assumed that NC State would have a little bit of an inferiority complex. And I'll be real transparent with you. When I was at Michigan State, I got a roommate my sophomore year named KC, and he transferred from Siena College in New York. And I remember asking him, what has surprised you about MSU? And he said, well, I really like it a lot, but I didn't realize Spartans had an inferiority complex to Wolverines in Michigan. And so I kind of thought NC State would feel that way. You know, the old axiom, two's company, three's a crowd, with all the hype about Duke and UNC and sort of the prestige of those schools. And I just thought they would sort of feel like they were third man out. I am sure there is a little of this, but what I found on our visit was an incredibly proud school, beaming with pride and confidence, comfortable in its own skin, and not feeling like it needs to take a backseat to anyone. And I'll explain a little bit later. I sort of have three theories on where this pride is coming from. But before we get to that, it was originally North Carolina College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts, and it was founded March 7th, 1887. It was originally one of the public land-grant colleges. You may remember Dave and I did a deep dive on the public land-grant colleges and how they birthed so many of our leading universities across this country. And so it was known as North Carolina A&M for short. And in 1917, it changed its name to North Carolina State College of Agriculture and Engineering. And like a lot of schools, it struggled during the Great Depression. And it really kind of took off after World War II, really with the GI Bill that brought so many former military servicemen to the campus. And it wasn't actually named North Carolina State University until the year Dave and I were born, 1963. So that's when it changed its name. Now, North Carolina State got hundreds of acres in 1987, which was its 100th year in existence. And so it added the new campus called the Centennial Campus. Centennial named because it's actually 100 years after the time it was founded. And they've pumped close to $750 million into developing that campus ever since. It's only about a 1.2 miles from where Joy lives. So now it's just called NC State, or a lot of people just call it State. It's located in Raleigh, which is the capital of North Carolina. And State, or NC State, is 2 to 3 minutes from downtown Raleigh. And students take advantage of this in lots of ways: internships, co-ops, concerts, restaurants, shows, and museums. State, or NC State, is the largest university in North Carolina, and NC State is one of the 17 institutions that constitute the University of North Carolina system. And so I think one of the things you need to know in order to understand NC State is you have to understand what we call the research triangle. So I just want to mention a little bit about what the research triangle is. So following World War II, North Carolina's economy really could no longer rely on their historical industries of textiles, furniture, and agriculture. Their market share was declining and jobs were disappearing. And so a group of academics at NC State and Duke came up with an idea of creating the park, so that universities could all collectively do research and leverage the area's strengths and keep the most talented people in state. So in 1959, they founded Research Triangle Park, was created to increase innovation in the area. And it was central to both Duke, North Carolina State, and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So the Research Triangle, or sometimes just called the Triangle, common nicknames for a metropolitan area in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. And it's anchored by these three major universities: North Carolina State, Duke, and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And they're located in the three cities of Raleigh, Durham, and where Lisa lives, Chapel Hill, respectively. Now, the Triangle, that name was really concretized into the public conscious in 1950 with the creation of Research Triangle Park. And this is home to numerous tech companies and enterprises. So now the name is really used to refer to the whole geographic region, the Triangle, but originally it referred to these three universities, which if you look on a map, they form like a triangle: North Carolina State, Duke, and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the flagship. And the three core counties of Wake County, Durham County, and Orange County are the homes of the three research universities. Wake County, the home of NC State and Raleigh; Durham, the home of Duke; and Orange County, the home of Chapel Hill. And this Research Triangle Park is one of the most prominent high-tech research and development parks in the United States. And so it was created by state and local governments and nearby universities. And it is home to over 300 companies that employ over 55,000 workers and over 10,000 contractors. And big companies too, like for example, GlaxoSmithKline has an R&D center with over 5,000 employees. Cisco Systems has another 5,000 employees. The only place that has more people is the Silicon Valley. The National Institute of Health has its National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and all in these 7,000 acres. So the first reason why I think NC State has so much pride is because it's at the epicenter of the research triangle, and Raleigh is a capital, and Raleigh and Cary are right there. They're experiencing explosive growth, and it's a complete tech hub, and North Carolina State is a STEM or tech school, and it has all kinds of internships, co-ops, partnerships with these tech giants. And Lisa, you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that unlike Illinois, like more companies just keep moving and moving and moving into the area. So a major reason why my daughter Joy ended up at NC State. Sure, the counseling program had a unique social justice focus that appealed to her, but she really wanted to be in a city that she was going to love. Also, she knew that this is grad school, and she knew she was going to be interning and doing a practicum, and there was a very good chance she'd end up living where she went to grad school. And this is where connections would be. And Lisa actually gave Joy that advice, to pick a city that you want to live in. So she looked at other schools. She considered University of Florida and Florida State, but she said, I like Raleigh more than Gainesville or Tallahassee. She looked at Mercer and Georgia State, but she said, I've been in Atlanta for most of my life, and I'm ready for a change. She looked at UGA and said, I loved Athens. It's amazing, but I'm ready for something different. Vanderbilt. And she said, I like Raleigh more than Nashville. North Carolina A&T. I like Raleigh more than Greensboro. In fact, the whole research triangle is full of Greensboro transplants. Hampton. She decided she preferred 7 hours away rather than 700 miles away from home. So it really came down to UNC Charlotte and NC State. They were her top two choices because she likes Charlotte and she likes Raleigh. And I'll tell you, Lisa, she absolutely loves Raleigh. And she's already told me, sorry, Dad, but I'm probably not coming back to Atlanta. Anything you want to share so far?
No, I mean, I think that, it is what I thought of as sort of a scientist engineering research paradise at NC State. Because of its location in the triangle, these students have just innumerable opportunities, and it seems like they have a lot of funding for their research as well. So it's a very dynamic place. And I think the whole research triangle area is really dynamic in terms of technology, in terms of innovation. It's just a very intellectually happening place around here.
It really is. And it's I've heard it's got either the second or third most PhDs per capita in the country. I'm talking about the whole area. It's very diverse. Like, you'll find, a lot of times in the South, you get black, white, but there's a large South Asian community. There's a large East Asian community. There's a growing Latino community. There's a very multiracial community. Joy talks about, wow, I can go in a grocery store and the entire grocery store is all Indian. It's like the coolest thing. And so, that's all part of that culture. So back to NC State, they have 3 campuses. I'm going to first talk about the Centennial campus. This is where engineering happens. This is where the Wilson College of Textiles happens. And it's primarily a research campus. Hunt Library's here, which is really spectacular. I wish we could have got over there, Lisa, on our trip, because we were on main campus, but Hunt Library's won all kinds of awards. It has its own book bot, a robot that goes and gets books for you.
Yeah, they have that at the University of Chicago too.
So
Mm-hmm.
So it's super tech savvy, very modern. It's got a game lab, digital production, and it's a $115 million library. So it's really nice. This is a very nice walking campus. It also has over 100 business and government agencies and offices here. It's sort of a private public research center. So that's your Centennial campus. Then you've got the main campus, which has 3 sub-campuses, North Campus, Central Campus, and South. North is the oldest part of NC State, home to the most academic departments, a few residence halls. Central is mainly residence halls, but there's also cafeterias, gyms, and student support facilities. And South is really the rest. North Carolina State is not really a school that has a consistent architecture throughout all its campuses, but the main campus is known for its distinctive red brick. All the first years live on the central part of main campus. And the third campus is the Centennial Biomedical Campus, and this is where the vet school is. And there's also a working animal farm and emergency hospital there. So some of them, I'm going to go back into the main campus. That's where all the action is. That's literally, even that Joy lives like 1.2 miles from Centennial, she literally is on Main like all the time. And so some of the hot spots on Main, Carmichael Complex. This is really one of Joy's major hangouts. The gym is spectacular, and all the physical facilities there are really good, brand new, a lot of money there. Tally Student Center, I kind of like that place a lot. I hang out there, all kinds of different ethnic food, nice bookstore. There's a lot of affinity centers and groups there, Stewart Theater's there. And then on main campus, Hillsborough Street runs all the way through it, all the way to the back end of the campus. And there's lots of shops, eateries, and it gives State a unique vibe that sometimes it feels self-contained and closed and walled off, kind of like how Meredith was. And then other times it feels like it, especially on the Hillsborough side, it feels like it bleeds into Raleigh. What did you think, Lisa? Did you feel did it feel more self-contained, or did it feel more like it bled into the city of Raleigh to you?
Well, I think parts of it felt self-contained, but then you would just walk a block and you'd be on this busy street with every shop imaginable that goes. I mean, Hillsborough Street is the main street in Raleigh that goes, to all the important places. So it manages to do both, which is, I think, hard for a school.
I agree. Yeah, it really does have both. So it's sort of hard to stereotype. Now, some of the other hotspots on campus, one that I had never seen until the time you and I went, Lisa, a month ago, Free Expression Tunnel. That was like,
that
whoa.
was very cool.
Wasn't it cool? Why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Oh, well, this is a tunnel. I guess the school got tired of all the graffiti on campus. So they made a place where you can say whatever you want in this tunnel. And boy, have people done that. So there's all kinds of expressions from the sacred to the profane. And it's just a really arty, cool tunnel. You certainly get to get an idea of what's on people's minds at that particular moment walking through. So it's just a really neat space.
It really is. The tunnel functions as one of the 3 pedestrian tunnels underneath the railroad track separating North and Central Campus. But it's a place for sanctioned graffiti. Anyone can paint there, political statements there, personal messages, artwork. And it also kind of serves as a way they advertise events that are going around campus. Another spot, this is probably my favorite spot. You remember when I sat down, Lisa, on there, and I just relaxed and enjoyed it and chilled? They call it the Court of 1911. I thought this was the most beautiful part of the campus. This is very self-contained. I tend to like self-contained. So it had there was like the quad there, gorgeous quad. This is a place where people hang out and relax. They do the frisbees. They snowball fights if they get cold weather. And you can also see another famous landmark, which is the famous bell tower. And that bell tower, they light it up red anytime anything exciting happens, like a big sports win, or they get a big grant, or a new professor comes in. And by the way, NC State, their colors are red and white. And once again, this Memorial Bell Tower, it's in the northeast corner of the campus. It's kind of the signature image that you'll see most often, like on an NC State postcard. The motto at NC State is think and do the extraordinary. And so I like that. It used to just be think and do, but now they've added, they went from think and do to think and do the extraordinary. I liked it. They upgraded the motto.
Some branding happened there, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Now, you'll see the Wolf Line buses. They take you back and forth between Centennial, the main campus. They also have a pretty cool bus system to go to UNC as well. Now, one thing I'll say about NC State, it is a huge sports school spirit place. I mean, this place is just oozing with school spirit. They won the basketball championships both in 74 and 83. And students frequently will storm Hillsdale Street, celebrate jubilantly when they get a big win, especially if it's over Carolina or an ACC rival. I know I watched them play Clemson about a month ago on football, and that place looked so fun. It was packed. They were going crazy the whole time. So if you like that sort of large tailgate culture, get out and barbecue and do all that, face paint, they've got all that. Football, basketball, they go crazy. School spirit is popping. Their nickname is the Wolf Pack. And one thing I'm not that crazy about, they play football at Carter Finley Stadium and they play basketball at PNC Bank. Those are both about 6 minutes away off campus. So it's not quite like on the heart of the campus, but at least they have really, really nice facilities. And one thing they have that I really like, so it's part of the transition, and as a freshman, you come in for freshman orientation for a week. And at the end of the week, they have this huge celebration they call Packapalooza. Remember, Wolfpack is the name. Packapalooza. And this is like a massive block party. And concerts and clubs are on display. They literally shut Hillsborough Street down for this huge block party with like fireworks and everything. And everybody just talks about how much fun it is. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about the second reason why I believe that NC State students feel they don't need to take a backseat to anyone, and that is because they have some of the strongest programs, not just in the state, but in the nation. And so, our visit started out, Lisa and I, we got a chance to have lunch. I'm not going to mention the name just for confidentiality reasons, but we got to have lunch with one of our podcast listeners. He treated us to a really nice Indian lunch. Joy came and everything. And it was great because he invited his son. And his son is a Park Scholar, which is one of the top scholarships in the country. It's a full cost of attendance scholarship that only 15 people around the country and 30 in North Carolina residents get. He was an award winner. And so talking to him was really fascinating. And Lisa left and said, I might have met the most impressive student I've ever met before. I mean, he was very impressive, wasn't he, Lisa?
Oh, so smart.
What did you take away what did you learn about NC State from our conversations with him?
Well, I think I learned that it was very rigorous academically. He talked about it being very time consuming, but very good, and it seemed like he was getting a lot of hands-on experience in his engineering classes as well. It seemed like he kept pretty busy with his studies. So it did not seem like a party school. It did not seem, like it would be super easy, but it seemed like he was really engaged in it.
You know what, Lisa? I'm going to shout out his name because his dad, Vince, rightfully so, is very proud of him. And I'll ask Vince before we publish this. If he wants me to delete it, then I'll delete it, his name for the podcast. But Vince's son is named Dante, and he deserves to be recognized as someone who is truly going places. Well, one of the things that was fascinating was, so he got in, of course, Chapel Hill and North Carolina State. He had to pick between both schools. And he's like, I'm so glad I picked North Carolina State. But my girlfriend goes to North Carolina Chapel Hill, and she's so glad she picked Chapel Hill. For her, Chapel Hill was perfect. For me, NC State is perfect. And why is that? Well, he was in engineering. He's thinking maybe about med school, but he's in engineering. And that program is one exceptional program. In fact, after we met him and we went on campus and we just started randomly talking to students, the second person I met was an engineer. The third, an engineer. The fourth, an engineer. And so one of the reasons why I feel they don't feel they need to take a backseat to anybody is they just have so many programs that they know are the top in the state and in many cases in the country. And Chapel Hill doesn't really have engineering. It has a little bit of biomedical. It's got computer science, but it doesn't. If you're in North Carolina and you're going to be an engineer, you go to NC State. Yeah. You might go to Duke, but Duke only takes 12% of their whole population is from North Carolina. And there's lots of other programs besides engineering. And so that's and it's already a small school. So that's not that many people going to be at Duke. But NC State is really where you're going to go. Some of the other really strong programs, they have a really great co-op program, one of the top in the country. They have co-ops for all 11 of their schools, or colleges. So they divided the whole school up into colleges, and they have co-ops for all 11 of them. It's not just an engineering co-op. Now, almost 25% of the undergraduate degrees go to engineers, which is a lot. Another great program they have is called exploratory studies. That's about 20% of students. These are people that come in and they don't know what they want to major in. And they have won all kinds of awards for the counseling that they have in that program. They house them together, and for a year, they get really in-depth, intense counseling and helps them to figure out what their major may want to be. Some of the other really popular majors: management, business, life science, animal science, psychology, political science, sports management, fashion and textile management, and environmental science. Some of the programs that would be most respected and prestigious, in addition to engineering, are math and statistics, agriculture, life science, textiles, architecture and design, animal science, veterinary medicine, and business. And I'll get even more specific. So they have a number of programs that are regarded as top in the nation. So their nuclear engineering program it's like a debate with MIT, Michigan, Ann Arbor, and North Carolina State, who's got the best nuclear engineering program in the country. And then their biological and agricultural engineering program, they're like in a debate with a bunch of other schools, like they're regarded as a top 4 program in the country there. And then industrial engineering is considered top 15, material science, top 15, civil engineering, top 20, environmental engineering, top 20, chemical engineering, computer engineering, biomedical engineering. These are all like top 25 programs like in the country. And a lot of people think of their electrical engineering as a top 10 program. And then actually when we met with Dante, he thought mechanical was their strongest, if I remember correctly. But they just have these incredible programs. And they are literally the only college dedicated to textiles in the entire country. And they have a whole Warren Wilson College of Textiles. You can get degrees all the way to the PhD level. They partner with the National Council of Textile Organizations. Of course, North Carolina was a textile powerhouse traditionally. And so that's actually seen as arguably the top textile program in the world. So that's one of the reasons why I think there's so much pride, is because they know they've got these programs that they feel that, they can take a backseat to nobody. I looked up, Lisa, when they overlap with Duke wins that battle, but it's 70-30. And when they overlap with Chapel Hill, it's 75-25. So they don't win their overlaps, but that's still a lot of wins, 30%, 25%, where people are picking them over the other two schools in the triangle. Some other extremely strong programs, fashion and apparel design. That's considered a top 10 program in the country. And then their master's program in data analytics was the first one ever launched in the United States back in 2007. And then I know their veterinary medicine program is really hard to get into, and it's considered in the conversation top 3 or 4 programs in the country when it comes to vet medicine. And once again, graphic design is really, really strong. And then they have a really strong entrepreneurship program that's regarded as top 10 in the country. And they've spun off a lot of 135 businesses that have spun off right out of that entrepreneurship program. So, you'll find a range of kids there. You'll find, this is actually a quote, this doesn't come from me. You'll find everything from hipster to farm boy and everything in between. The politics are really mixed here compared to some of the engineering schools out of state that they overlap with a lot. Other ACC powerhouses, Clemson and Virginia Tech, we've done spotlights on both. NC State is like Bernie Sanders. It's very liberal compared to those schools, particularly Clemson. But compared to Chapel Hill, it's actually more conservative. It has a pretty large rural population that goes anywhere from 33 to 36%, which is pretty large rural population. And I think that goes back to its history as an agricultural school with agrarian roots. I'll say a few things about the application, and then you can open up and say whatever's on your mind, Lisa. So the application, they accept the Common App or the Coalition. Normally they did require test scores, but because of this culture we're in, they're test optional now. It'll be very interesting to see what the Board of Governors decides for 2023, whether they stay test optional or go back to being test required. They accept recommendations, but don't require them. They look for more A's than B's, and they look for academic rigor. So they like to see that you've maxed out and you've taken the APs, the IBs, the dual enrollments. Pretty simple process, though. They have early action and regular admission. They strongly encourage people to apply by the November 1 early action date, and that makes you eligible for scholarships. And there are a number of things like their studio-based majors. You have to apply by November 1. Honors program, and they have a scholars program. You have to apply by November 1st for their honors program and their scholars program. Now, they do have a couple essays. One essay asks, I'll read it actually, describe any other obstacles or hardships you've encountered that have affected you personally or academically and how you dealt with them, 250 words. And then North Carolina State is committed to building a just and inclusive community, one that does not tolerate unjust or inhumane treatment. It denounces it, and clearly and loudly. Please describe what these words mean to you and how you are going to contribute.
It's a trap, kids.
It's not done. How you will contribute to a more diverse and inclusive NC State environment. So that's 250 words. So you got to write. You got to write a little bit. They do look at your activities. They do look at that. And they don't call it eligibility in local context like the UCs do, but they basically do look at eligibility in local context. And what that means is they do look at the school that you're coming from. They look at the resources that your school has, and they sort of judge you through the prism of the resources that you've had, which is one of the reasons why it's tougher to get in coming from the research triangle than it is coming in from more rural schools. And Lisa, you know that from living in that area.
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty much everyone I talk to here, we all just sort of assume that none of our kids are going to NC State, Duke, or UNC Chapel Hill, because you have to be in the top couple percent of your class to get into those places. That they're very familiar with all the schools here, so we all kind of know that we're going to have to look elsewhere. And that is one of the little bit sad things about living in Chapel Hill. Actually, is it's sort of like these rarefied halls that your kids will never get to enter.
there is one thing I'll say about that. So the one thing about North Carolina State is that you are applying directly into a program when you apply there. So on the application, it literally asks you, I'll read it verbatim. It says, we encourage you to select two different majors because if we determine you're not competitive for your first choice major, you'll be reviewed for your second choice major. And so you have to pick these two different majors, and they have 11 schools. They have College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, College of Design, College of Education, College of Engineering, College of Humanities and Social Sciences, College of Natural Resources, Poole College of Management, College of Sciences, Wilson College of Textiles, University College, College of Veterinary Medicine. Some of those were on the grad school level. But you have to pick a college. You have to, pick a major within that, and they do look at you through that context. There's two really big scholarships that they have. I mentioned one already, the Park Scholarship, where they take 30 in state and 15 out of state. These are cost of attendance. This is like winning the lottery. This is room. This is board. This is tuition. This is books. This is travel. This is spending money, laptop. I mean, this is everything. It's all of that. Obviously, it's incredibly hard to win. And if you're going to be one of the 30 people around the country, I keep nominating spectacular people. I think I may have a winner this year from Pennsylvania. We'll see. But it's really hard to get. We mentioned that Dante was a Park Scholar winner and that he's a especially talented student. Well, the Park Scholarship gets 2,200 applicants all over the country for less than a 3% acceptance rate. And then they have the Goodnight Scholar Program, which was established in 2008 by the generosity of James Goodnight and Ann Goodnight and the SAS Institute. And the Goodnight program offers a renewable award of $19,500 a year for up to 4 years. And these undergraduate students, they have to come from North Carolina, and they have to major in science, technology, engineering, or math. So it's STEM-based. But if you're getting $20,000 in state, that's going to drive your cost down really low. Now, they do have some income caps on that. It's for middle and lower income students. Lisa, I was reading through some of the comments on our survey, and one listener I thought had a really good point, who said, I love the spotlights, but could you please share some of the things you feel the school needs to work on more than you do? I thought that was actually a really fair point. So for NC State, I'd like to see the classes be smaller. I also love that it's a North Carolina school with students from 100 counties. And I know Lisa and I both had a really in-depth conversation with a student from Hawaii who had come all the way from Hawaii to NC State and loved the school because they were the #1 textile engineering program in the country. But we didn't talk to that many out-of-state students. And when I look at the numbers, they have like 300 from California, 300 from Texas. But I feel they could really use more students from the Midwest, Southwest, and students from the West. They're still in the high 80s when it comes to the percentage of students from North Carolina. So I'm going to jump into the stats in a second. I want to say the third reason why I think NC State has so much self-confidence. But anything you want to chime in with, Lisa?
No, I mean, they just have a lot of really impressive programs. And, I think their psychology program is very good too. I mean, that's well known. And they have a lot of depth, I think, and breadth. And I think, you get into one of those programs, you're going to have some really great opportunities for research, for internships, and for a lot of other experiences.
Well said. So here's the stats. 37,532 total students, 24,955 undergrad, 12,577 grad and professional. Now, the third reason I think they have so much self-confidence is because they know they're a hot school. So it wasn't that long ago they were just getting a little over 20,000, and now they're getting over 30,000 applications. And I think it was either last week or the week before, at least I talked about, I went to Smith College on a counselor fly-in program, 12 of us in 2019. It's one of the last trips I got before the pandemic, really. And the one guy that I really clicked with the most, there was only 12 counselors of us that were there, and we were there for 2 full days. He had spent 4 years in North Carolina State's admission office, and he'd only been out about a couple years now. And so I just, me, Lisa, I just picked his brain, asked him everything I could about North Carolina State. And the one thing that he said, I cannot believe how much more competitive it is than when I was there 3 years ago. And we talked a lot about it. And one thing that he said about NC State is the difficulty in getting in. It varies so widely based on the program that you select. It's a lot like Virginia Tech that way. So it has these programs that are incredibly hard to get in. Like you said, you have to be at the top of your class, but then has some other programs where you can be fairly pedestrian and get in. So there's a big range there. It varies tremendously. So some more things about the stats. Applicants, 37.5% out of state, 4.2% international, so 42% non-North Carolina. Foreign countries that dominate were China and India, which shouldn't surprise you because those are tech powers. So more than 90% of the international applicants came from China and India. I looked that up. Top states other than North Carolina: Virginia, number 1, New York, number 2, Florida, number 3, Pennsylvania, number 4, South Carolina, 5, Massachusetts, 6, Georgia, 7. 32,907 applications for first-year students, 4,118 transfer applications. One of them is one of my students who transferred in from University of Tennessee at Knoxville, who's there. 37% of students live on campus, with freshmen being required to live on campus. And some of the areas that are growing the most, they went from 14% out of state to 15.6% out of state. 11.5% first gen to 17% first gen. And this is all in 1 year. This is just from 2020 to 2021. They still have more men than women on this campus, but this incoming class had 53.2% women and 46.8% men, and 33.2% were from rural areas, which is a pretty large rural population. All 100 North Carolina counties, 50 states and 38 countries, 69.6% white, 8.8% Asian, 8% Latino, 6% Black, 4.2% multiracial, 2.2% international, 18.7% Pell Grant. Acceptance rate 47.4, middle 50% on the SAT, 1290 to 1430, middle 50% on the ACT, 27 to 32, 45% were in the top 10% in their class, 188 valedictorians and salutatorians. 93% of students returned for year 1. And this is where statistics can be a little deceiving. So the 4-year graduation rate is 50%, which you think is kind of not that great. But the 5-year rate is 75.8. And one of the reasons for that is they have such a robust co-op program. And so people oftentimes when they co-op, they're going to extend it a year and get real world experience. So, and other schools are like this as well, especially a lot of engineering schools where people take 5 years. So I think it's more fair to look at the 5-year rate of 75.8 than the 4-year in their case. Okay, the middle 50% on GPAs, weighted 417 to 4.48, but that's confusing because who knows what the weighting scale they're using. So let's do unweighted, 3.75 to 3.97. So that's the middle 50% GPA. 52% of students did not submit test scores in this most recent year. Transfer GPA coming in from other colleges, 3.21 to 3.82. That would be your college GPA in college. And they do get a lot of students from the North Carolina community colleges. So that's a big pipeline as well. They're very receptive to students transferring from community college. 56.5% of students are in STEM majors and 43.5% are not. The main campus has 2,137 acres and the Centennial campus, 1,200 acres. 35 students in a class is the average class size. So that's North Carolina State. Lisa, anything else you want to add?
Oh, well, just final impressions from me. It's big. It's a big school, but it is dynamic.
Felt big. It felt
vibrant.
big. It even felt even bigger than the size to me.
Yeah, it just has a big feel. But it is dynamic. It is vibrant. And I think that the students that we talked to were just thrilled with all the opportunities that they had. They seemed very happy. They seemed very confident. So I think that if you're interested in what they have to offer and you don't mind being in a big school environment or you want a big school environment, you should definitely take a look.
Thanks, Lisa. And you know what? You're a fun person to visit schools with.
I know. I am so fun. No, you're fun too, Mark.
Thank you. So Duke is the last one that we talked to lots of students at, and was our second time there in 6 months. So we are going to come back, but I don't want it. We're going to do App State first, where Lisa's about to go visit and hang out. And
I'm very excited.
Well, thanks again, and see you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Next week, in the news, most college students don't graduate in 4 years, so colleges and the government count 6 as a success. John Marcus of the Hechinger Report. Lisa and Mark next week will discuss how to effectively and randomly talk to students when you visit a college campus. Our interview is with Kevin Newton, the founder of An Education Abroad, on Going to College Overseas, Part 1 of 2. And our college spotlight is the University of Iowa, Iowa City, the flagship of the state of Iowa.
And friends, remember, it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there that will determine the trajectory of your career. Dave, quickly, I followed up with a student I worked with 13 years ago, and he just checked in with him. And, he went to the most elite schools for undergrad. He went to one of the brand names of the brand names, grad school, the brand names of the brand names. And we were just talking. And he said, you know what, Mark, a lot of people went where I went for undergrad, and they completely did not leverage the opportunity. And, they have jobs that you would not think they would end up with given the pedigree of where they went to school. And so it's all about leveraging your opportunities. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there.
Absolutely.
See you next week, my friend.
Take care, my friend.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Rouff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitru. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.